Okay. So now I want to introduce Rick Levin, almost my most famous fellow graduate student at Yale. We were graduate students together, and Rick's had a fabulous career. He could easily be the most famous member of our class, or we were maybe even off by one class. But somehow Janet Yellen was in that group too, so we share that feature. But Rick went on to a fabulous career, highlighted by a 20-year presidency of Yale University, and under his leadership, Yale did extraordinarily well in the physical plant, in the strengths of its science and engineering offerings, in the internationalization of the program, in offering financial aid to international students, in setting up a joint program in Singapore. It really was, he certainly was one of the greatest university presidents of the last several decades. Since then, he's gone on to become a consulting professor at SIEPR. So what could I say? I think that's really the highlight of his career, actually. He's also the president of Coursera, and he and his wife Jane have another claim to fame, namely our colleague, the parents of our colleague John Levin, who won the John Bates Clark Award and just finished being a great chairman of the economics department. So the second, maybe, I'm not sure, maybe there's been more great generations of Levins, but the last two generations seem to have been terrific. So thank you for doing this, Rick.
Thank you, John. Well, thanks so much. Great to be here at SIEPR, even with Madison Bumgarner on the mound, but I've already got my third base coach giving signals as the game progresses. I'll relate any relevant information. I'm engaged in a new life now after being president of Yale. It's a startup CEO at Coursera, which is one of the leaders in the provision of massive open online courses. This is not a company pitch, although there will be a little bit of company pitch. It's in the talk, really trying to look at the overview of what is this phenomenon of massive open online courses, and what does it portend for the future of higher education. And I'm going to be a little provocative about that, a little unconventional, but I hope to keep this short, the presentation short, so there's plenty of time for questions and responses. In fact, one of the big learnings from educational research on which the MOOCs are built is that the least efficient means of communicating information from one individual to another is the 50-minute lecture. And we do everything we can to chunk up the material so that there's plenty of interruption and opportunity for people to reflect rather than to sit passively for a long period of time. I'll try to keep the presentation short. So what is a MOOC, and why is it different? First, the definition, massive open online course, and each of those words has meaning. What's different is the massive, that is to say, the unprecedented scale, the number of students in a typical MOOC on our platform or on some of our rival platforms such as edX, or some of the open MOOCs that are offered here at Stanford, typically are so large that they're larger than what a professor might teach in a lifetime in a bricks and mortar institution. Second, these courses, generally, this may evolve, but at the moment, the companies that have gotten the largest market advantage and are the most dominant in this space have offered their content free to learners. The model is one of free content and possibly charging for a verified certificate that verifies your identity and proves that you've completed the work. And finally, what differentiates MOOCs from older generations of online free courseware, such as were offered in the last decade, notably by MIT, Berkeley, and Yale, is that these new courses, this new technology that blossomed around 3 years ago and has been developed by a number of companies and universities, it features a high level of interactive features, not just sitting back and watching the lecture filmed from the back of a classroom. It's much more engaging than the older style online courses. I want to differentiate MOOCs, which are these massive open courses, from lots of other things that are happening in online education. Obviously, there are online universities and have been for some time that charge tuitions, that offer degrees, but they are for smaller numbers. And obviously are so, only those who are willing to pay for those credentials enter that space. This is a new phenomenon, which is very large numbers taking courses essentially for free. Some of the features of a typical massive open online course are, as I said, it's not typically one long lecture. The work is divided up into modules, of which are very short videos typically, and they're followed by in-video quizzes or exercises or something to reflect on that breaks up the video, so you have a chance to do something else. Research done by Carl Wyman some 15 years ago, the Nobel Prize winning physicist, demonstrated, in fact, that the optimal length, even in a classroom, that the optimal way to run a lecture course, is to interrupt every 6 to 10 minutes and ask the class a question, maybe using clicker technology so they can register their votes on a multiple choice question, or just asking people to turn around and talk to their neighbor for a couple of minutes is a much more effective way. If you actually look at retention from that way of breaking up a lecture course, the retention more or less doubles at the end of a lecture if you've had those kinds of interruptions relative to going straight through. These in-video quizzes and the other assignments, most of them are auto-graded, giving instant feedback to the students. It's not just multiple choice. We've developed technologies to do auto-grading of computer code, auto-grading of mathematical expressions, auto-grading of short answer prose questions. We still are a long way, I think, from the technology of auto-grading of essay questions, but there are people thinking about that, and obviously it's easier to do that. It's easier to do that as a way of testing for the content, what's in the essay, than it is to actually test whether the reasoning is good, whether the logic of the argument is convincing, and so forth. So for written assignments, we use peer grading, which surprisingly works well. This is one thing where the data had to convince me. When I first signed on to do this, I was very skeptical, but the correlation of the peer grades with the instructor's own grades is very high. The instructor gives rubrics to the peer graders, sort of says what I'm looking for in the essays, and things tend to converge pretty nicely. Some of these online courses have projects. I think this is the way they're going to go. We're increasing at Coursera the use of projects associated with courses. It's another way to give the students a tangible artifact, not just a certificate, but something they've accomplished. So for example, in a course on Roman architecture taught by my colleague Diana Kleiner at Yale, where more people learned about Roman architecture in 6 weeks or 8 weeks than probably have ever learned about it before. She had the students design do drawings of the plan for a Roman city, and that's something that was peer graded, but people now have an artifact. If they want to look for a job in an architecture firm or something, or city planning, they've got a piece of work they did. And we're doing things like that in our courses on, for example, Android programming. People are writing an Android app as their project. And then finally, there's online discussion and question and answers, and I'll come back to that, but there are all kinds of interesting technologies for sorting and the discussion into relevant topics and threads. And there's a huge amount of innovation going on in all of this, and obviously not just at Coursera, lots of other places, including right here at Stanford, where you have a really first-class operation thinking about online technologies. The new medium allows you to rethink teaching. Now, here's the thing about the dirty little secret about my colleagues in the professorate. They're extremely conservative. That is, you all think they're, particularly around here, a lot of people think, oh, they're just these woolly-headed liberals. Well, they are, maybe, when it comes to politics, but they aren't when it comes to pedagogy, or anything about change in the university. I discovered that. I had a 20-year lesson in that kind of conservatism. But what I see here is, it reminds me of the people who, when movies were invented, thought, wow, what a terrific vehicle for filming stage plays. Now everybody can have the experience of going to a Broadway show. Yeah, you can do a lot of other things with film too. Or, gee, I got a new motor car in Paris in 1905, and it allowed me to drive to the marketplace and, take my groceries home in a more convenient way. Yeah, it does that, but Proust discovered that the countryside village that he loved to go to, that used to take a whole day to get to, and you'd spend a whole day there and a whole day back, was now accessible on a Sunday afternoon. And so the point is, the technology allows teaching to do things that it never could do before, and that you need to think about teaching in a different way. So for example, what is the optimal lecture segment length? I just told you, 6 to 10 minutes. And in fact, our research at Coursera says that 6 is better than 10. And how do I measure it? Why is it optimal? Because of how well do students do in the course? What are their learning outcomes? What is the optimal course duration? Well, aren't courses 10 weeks long if they're at Stanford, or 13 weeks long if they're at Yale? Notice something, it really isn't a fixed length, but there's a quarter system and a semester system. But where did this come from? This is the calendar of an agricultural society, right, that breaks over the summer. Completely insane. Why is that the optimal length of a course? Why would we assume that students want to be doing something for 13 weeks that where they might want to do it more intensively in 4? So what have we found? 4-week courses are best in terms of retention and completion. 6-week courses are nearly as good. 10 or 12 or 13-week courses are not very good at all. By the way, this is the stuff I love about being an internet CEO, which is you have huge amounts of data out there, and you can actually learn from the data, which is one of the really great features of just being able to sort of test things as you go along. As a social scientist, having to rely in the past on public data sources that are years behind, you can create your own data and test your own hypotheses. It's very exciting. What else are faculties having a hard time getting their arms around? Don't courses have to run on a fixed schedule? Shouldn't there be deadlines? Shouldn't the course go for however the number of weeks? Shouldn't it have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and there's a final exam and then it's over? Maybe. That's what stage plays do. Movies, it turns out you can watch for a while and you can leave and you can come back and watch the rest, right, with modern technology. Well, why not courses for busy professionals who can't necessarily say that I'm going to do 1 week's worth of work for each of the next 6 weeks? A lot more convenient to have on-demand availability of the courses. If you were to go to Netflix and they were to tell you that they had 20,000 movies in their catalog, but only 16 are available now, you would have the experience that the person has today going to Coursera or edX websites saying, we have 800 courses, but there are only 22 that you could actually start this week. We're changing that. And just this summer, we introduced 9 so far on-demand courses, and by the end of the year, we'll have 30, and by next year, we hope to have 200 or 300 that you can start anytime. I've mentioned this, using data to improve pedagogy, but this to be concrete from a teacher's point of view. Think of the fact that if you're a teacher, sometimes you find after an exam is done that you've given questions that the students didn't get. Well, now, if you've got an on-demand course that's going all the time, you get early data that, boy, the students are not getting this question. You have that data, you can work on it and decide, is it because my lecture is confusing that led up to it, or is the question poorly worded? And consequently, if the answer is the lecture is confusing, you can go tape that segment in its modular 6-minute thing and put it back on the site and improve your pedagogy. Just one example. Another thing that's different that people are going to need to get their arms around is The relevant credential in the academic world has always been the multi-year, perhaps 1 year for some master's programs, degree that is earned at the end of a course of study. Well, why is that necessarily relevant in a highly mobile workplace where people may be able to demonstrate that by taking a single course or a set of courses, we call specializations, Udacity calls nano degrees, a set of courses that together that might give you a credential that the labor market recognizes as a relevant tool for getting a better job or promotion. We say a word about the MOOC landscape, who's out there. The major competitors at the moment in the United States for these open courses are edX, which is a consortium of universities with founding partners. Basically, the investment was made by Harvard and MIT, but with Berkeley and University of Texas system as other charter partners. Udacity, which is a creature of Stanford, just like Coursera. Both of those companies came out of Stanford in the 2011-12 academic year, and edX was started in response. So these are the pioneers. They've gone somewhat different direction. NovoEd is a more recent entrant. The differences are that Coursera and edX basically are out there with at pretty large scale with open courses focused, and the content of their platform, content on their platform is pretty much across the board, the whole subject matter of a university. So it's not highly specialized. Udacity started that way, decided they were going to go after the niche of high-tech training courses, and they stopped using essentially university partners primarily as their instructors, and are using industry personnel primarily as their instructors, whereas edX and Coursera are strictly partnerships with universities and maybe a few other cultural institutions that are offering their courses. NovoEd is focused also on the university market primarily, but they have picked up on a dimension that edX and Coursera weren't really working hard to develop, which was to maximize the amount of interactive and collaborative work among groups of students. And they have kind of nifty algorithm for sorting students into groups and facilitating interaction of small-scale groups on a large-scale platform. So they're another company in the mix. And then there's been a response globally because everybody wants a national platform. So the United Kingdom and France, actually Germany too, and China have all tried to start national platforms with government backing to get their own universities on. By the way, Coursera and edX have lots of university partners. Coursera about 3 times as many as edX, all around the world. But they are, Coursera and edX are picking essentially only the top tier universities. These national platforms intend to go much deeper into their territories and involve a far larger number of universities teaching in the relevant language of their country. Just a little. This is a little promotional, but if you just take the shares in terms of the number of registered learners on each of these major platforms, you can see that Coursera is far in the lead at the moment. Who are the learners? These are surprising numbers. Only 15, and I don't have demographic breakdown for the other platforms, but I think edX is probably very similar to Coursera. Only 15% of our learners are currently enrolled in undergraduate degree programs. That surprises many people because people think the primary use of these, again, not thinking out of the box, but thinking inside the box, you think the primary audience is college-age students. It's not. It's not even close. 85% are either younger or older. 70% are over 30 years old. So people like you are taking these courses. And people that are looking for employment gain. I'll come back to that. About 50% of the enrollments are taken by people who are taking courses that are delivering career relevant skills in business, in computer science, teacher professional development, some public health courses, mainly business and tech, where most of where the heavy weight is. And this was an instantly global enterprise. Coursera and edX have completely global learner populations. Only a third of our learners are from the United States, 35% from the US and Canada. About a third are from developed countries in Europe and Asia, and about a third from emerging economies. So these, unlike many internet companies that start in the US and then develop international markets, this was instantly global. And who are the learners? We did cluster analysis on our learners, and actually I used cluster analysis quite a bit in some of my research on technology back in my days as an economist. And I've never seen such clean clusters. I mean, it was really remarkable. There are 4 clusters, period. And here they are. There's younger learners, primarily in high school and college, who are taking courses that clearly are intended to get them to the next level academically. Then the largest number, these bars, by the way, are numbers of people, so you can see that the actual, if you take the sum of the area under the curve there, you can see that the largest number of users fall into the enrichment learner category, which are people throughout the age distribution. It's age on the horizontal axis. I'm sorry, it's just hard to read. The lots and lots of people throughout life who are taking courses for personal edification, taking the liberal arts courses that we offer, and courses that elicit kindle their intellectual curiosity. And then the other 2 segments, about 20% are tech skill builders. They're taking programming courses, they're taking courses in algorithms, and so forth. And then there's business career changers, people that are looking for management skills, they're looking for accounting, they're looking for finance, they're looking for tools that will help them to get a better job or to start a business. That's a very popular use case. And the curriculum, again, this is Coursera's data. edX would look similar, maybe edX is a little bit more tilted to science and IT than we are, but it's a fair number of business courses. The average enrollments are highest in business courses, about a quarter of the courses in IT, and the rest across the arts and sciences, essentially, liberal arts. Just another sense of, those are who the learners are, what they're doing, the scale. Coursera now has more than 1 million monthly active learners. We're about 3 times the size of edX, so all these numbers are probably scale about 3 to 1. We have 100,000, actually getting closer to 120,000 monthly course completions. And I mentioned this before, most instructors on our platform teach more students in 1 course session than they teach in an entire career, teaching on campus. And it's incredibly edifying for those professors. They really like doing this, and they get tremendous reinforcement from doing it. And the students communicate with them, and they feel like they're doing something at a scale they never imagined they would be able to do with their lives. And this is really my big argument, is that I think this phenomenon of scale is the underappreciated part about MOOCs. People think of it as a transformational technology that can change the way we teach in universities. And that's true. It can really help with pedagogy. Some of the work John Mitchell's here, some of the work John is doing here at Stanford is really admirable in this regard, using online tools to improve in-class education right here at Stanford. But that's not the really radical thing that's happening. What's really happening, that to me is a radical thing, is that our great universities, the ones who are partners of Coursera and edX, have a historic mission, which is to advance knowledge through research and to disseminate knowledge through publication and teaching. Almost everybody's mission statement says something like this, right? And so teaching at scale, I would argue, actually redefines that mission. How? Because the dissemination mission now is publication, and what does that mean today? It means academic specialists writing for other academic specialists for pretty small audiences, and then teaching. We're teaching highly selected elites. Maybe they're meritocratic elites. We hope that they are in our universities, but by and large, it's a small sliver of the literate population of the world. And that's how great professors who are the experts in the world in their fields, that's their audience. Narrow specialists and highly selected students. But I believe that in the future, universities will be evaluated not just on the quality of their research and the quality of their on-campus teaching programs, but by the global impact of their teaching. Because we now have a new tool that actually changes the game. What is my job as a professor? My job is now to participate in the education of hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of learners. And over a lifetime, if you were to offer a MOOC through a full teaching career, you would literally get pretty quickly to millions of learners. And think about that. To me, this is why I took the job. It's not because I thought we could get the cost at Michigan State down, by substituting online courses for live instruction. It's because it's democratizing higher education. It's making its reach far more palpable, far more important in the world, and far more capable of shaping lives. Examples of changing lives. Charmaine escaped a brutal marriage, went to another town. She was literate. She had a high school education. She and a friend decided to start a bakery. She took 5 courses from Wharton on how to run a small business and accounting and finance, and 1 cooking course online, and today she's a successful bakery owner. Scotty Rushing had a high school education in the Midwest. He had an unskilled job through much of his 20s and 30s. In his late 30s, the downturn came. He lost his job. He became unemployed. He descended into poverty and depression, and he was in really terrible shape and literally homeless when he discovered Coursera, and he prepared himself to go to college. And he's now starting his junior year at a state university in the Midwest, and he won the award for the outstanding sophomore in his class. Daniel Bergman is an autistic young man who could never connect. He couldn't cope in school. He went to special schools. He didn't do very well there. He loves watching courses online. He can interact and do the work. He's taken over 50 Coursera courses, and it's changed his life. Made him a person actually more able to interact with people in the world on the basis of this experience. These are just 3 of hundreds and thousands of stories we hear about how online courses are reaching people and changing their lives for the better. It's helping at more scale. It's helping people build careers. It's just getting going. It's one thing to get the faculty to understand that the format of courses needs to be different. It's another thing to get employers to recognize that these credentials can be valuable. But LinkedIn now lists MOOC credentials as one of the fields on your profile. A company here in the Valley, Tom Siebel runs, called C3 Energy, is actually paying $2,000 to each of his engineers to take Coursera's course. It's a Stanford course, Andrew Ng's course, in machine learning. The Singapore government is paying for hundreds of people to take the Johns Hopkins specialization on data science, and a number of companies are sponsoring capstone projects at the end of these multi-course specializations and promising to interview the candidates with the best projects. This is some of the interactions we're having with companies. It's got a long way to go, but I think it's very hopeful. So final question, are MOOCs a disruptive innovation or a force multiplier? Well, I've tipped my hand. But the big question, will MOOCs transform higher education? Will it lower costs by displacing teachers and replacing institutions? So for example, will middle and lower tier schools import courses and reduce faculty labor costs? Yeah, I think so. Will that happen? Yeah, I think it will happen. It will happen slowly. The faculty guild is a powerful one. It will not be easy to happen, but it's starting to. Bob Schiller's Yale course in financial markets is being taught this year at the University of Nebraska, where the professor is flipping the classroom. Basically, he doesn't give lectures. They watch Bob's lectures, and then there's a discussion about it. In China, there's a lot of interest in doing this because they need it, because they have way too many students per faculty member, and they would like to import courses from the top tier Chinese institutions on the East Coast and use them throughout the country. So it will happen. It'll happen slowly in the United States. I think it can happen. Will it replace the intense personal experience of living in a residential university, having classmates, growing and maturing and becoming a citizen and becoming a leader and becoming a teammate, and all the things that go with great universities like Stanford and Yale? No, I don't think so. I think that this is stuff that the MOOCs can't deliver. But to people who basically are commuting in to take a community college course and driving home, this is a very viable substitute. Will students substitute online credentials for degrees earned at bricks and mortar institutions? Yes, I think so. I think that will happen. I think it's going to happen, again, slowly, but I think it's almost inevitable. So MOOCs will play a role, and MOOCs, the cousin of MOOCs, which are paid courses, smaller private online courses, SPOCs. They'll play a role in reducing the cost of education, but the big immediate impact is the force multiplier impact, that we are extending the reach of the world's great universities and increasing their enrollment by, at this point, 2 orders of magnitude. I think in the future, perhaps 3 or maybe 4. So that concludes my opening remarks, and I'm happy to take questions.
We have time for 20 minutes of questions,
Yeah.
so don't let me down.
What's the score? 3-0, the Giants are ahead. Yay.
So what is your business model? How do you make money? I'm over here.
Where are you?
Hello.
Oh, hi. Yeah, good question. I was going to have a last slide, and what's the business model, but I assumed it would be the first question, and I was right. Okay. So the business model now is it's free. The content's free, but if you want your identity verified through keystroke analysis and facial recognition, you can pay $50, roughly average price, to get a certificate, a verified certificate of completion. edX has essentially the same kind of model. Now there are other platforms out there where you pay for everything, and it's not. I mean, Udacity is quickly migrating that way. They have way fewer free courses than they used to, but they are definitely skills-based, and prices are still low for most of the courses. We think at Coursera, because of our scale, that the model of being free with the content and charging for the certificate will actually get us to at least a viable financial position. And I think if we want to go to the next level, we're going to have to do some other things, like formal programs of content licensing to universities that want and companies that want to use the courses for their own purposes, creating closed communities on top of the open content. Our lifelong learners, for example, they don't care about the certificate. By the way, there's 4 population segments. It's the business learners and the tech learners who actually pay, and not the lifelong learners very much. But suppose you could offer the lifelong learners a once-a-week live video chat with the English professor they love or the history professor that they love. People would probably pay $500 or $800 for that experience, and so you can monetize there. So there's a lot of different strategies, but frankly, the way our revenue is growing for the verified certificates, I think will at least lead Coursera to be viable. It's not going to do a lot for our university partners. We have 128 of them, and so we'd be viable if we had $100 million of revenue. We'd be fine. We split that with the universities, but $50 million to 128 universities doesn't amount to much for the average university. So if universities are actually finding, from their business point of view, the MOOCs are great for lead generation, that they actually they are great advertisements for the university, and people migrate on very substantial numbers from our courses to higher paying, closed, selective admissions courses. Wharton, for example, 55% of its executive MBA programs this year took a Coursera Wharton course before before they took the high pay course. So there are models that will I think work for different universities in different ways.
Sure. Ellen, you have to, yeah. Okay.
Rick, you showed that 100,000 students complete a course every month. What proportion of registered students never complete a course, and do you have a sense of why?
Yeah, we do. So, so the students register right now, and they have this experience that they often have to wait weeks till the course starts. We lose half of the registrants never actually come into the course, don't see a single video. So it's kind of misleading to think of that as a dropout rate. It's half of the people never show up. Of the people who show up, this is like, this is like the shopping period in most of our colleges on steroids, because basically nothing. You haven't paid tuition. All you've done is sign up. You can watch a couple of videos and decide, I don't want to take this course. So we lose half of the rest that way. And then what's left is maybe 20 to 25% of the original registrants finish the first week. And of that group, half or a little more than half complete the course. And about 2/3 of those actually do all the assignments. About 1/3 of them audit, watch all the lectures, but don't do all the quizzes and stuff. So what is the completion rate on the original denominator? 6 or 7%. What is the rate of completion of doing all the assignments plus auditing on the original denominator? 10 or 11%, something like that.
So what do we have? Definitely pick somebody out. There you go.
Thanks, Rick. It seems to me that the arrival of MOOCs and the growth of MOOCs is a challenge to universities to focus, to traditional universities to focus on immersive and experiential learning. What would you advise traditional universities in terms of how to deal with this this disruptive innovation that the MOOC is actually causing?
I'd say the way I advise them is make more of them and serve the world. And by the way, it'll serve your interests because it'll increase your global visibility. It'll help to attract graduate students from around the world. It will make your professors happier people, feeling more fulfilled. That most people go into these jobs with an eye to trying to communicate the fruits of their scholarship to the world, and this is allowing people to do it on a scale never before imagined. So for the great research universities, this is really not disruptive at all, I think. It's a magnifier of what they can do. The tougher adaptation are the places sort of more in the middle, where they could be net importers of content instead of net exporters.
John, you want to comment?
So we have a very traditional force multiplier already out there. It's called textbooks. Far more students have studied computer architecture from the textbook I wrote at my Berkeley than we could teach in 4 lifetimes.
Right.
Now, I'd be the first to admit that this may replace traditional textbooks. Mm-hmm. But then the question becomes, how do you think about that investment? Because, of course, universities right now, sort of faculty write textbooks. It's sort of on the side. It's a lot of their own time outside of the institution. I think the thing we've seen is that the MOOCs demand a lot of ongoing commitment from the faculty member in order to be refreshed, to be new. How is that going to be compensated and paid for in the long term?
Well, textbook writers obviously do the same. They new editions every 3 years and that sort of thing, right? So it's a continuing amount of work and investment. I think that goes down to the question of can you layer on to the open material things you can collect revenue on, and I think that entrepreneurial universities will do that. Coursera so far hasn't supported the higher pay closed courses because we didn't want to get distracted with all kinds of customization requests, and we wanted to sort of go to scale in the large market first. But we'll end up there. We'll end up supporting our partners in other ways of making them viable. So I think I think the combination of, this is a lead-in to other things that produce revenue will end up working for universities. I mean, I can see at Yale it's already starting to.
Maybe a couple on the far edge there. Then we'll get back.
I was wondering if you have multiple versions of the same course, like Economics 101 being given by 4 or 5 different lecturers. And the second thing is, do you have a mechanism where the students who take the class can then rate it, that other people can then get and say which versions of these classes are good and worth my time, and completion rates, et cetera?
So both very good questions. So the answer is, so far, in order to please our partners, we've pretty much let them put whatever content they want on, and that has led to some duplication. And as an opening strategy, it seems to me important, because for any university, vice provost for online education, their work is recruiting faculty to get them interested in doing this. It's a pretty big investment of time. And so we're a coalition of the willing at this point. And so we kind of are happy to take what we get. And actually, from Coursera's point of view, we've been delighted with what we get. I mean, the average quality is really quite good. But we do have some overlap, and we've actually just done some studying of some, indeed, principles of microeconomics. It's quite interesting. There are about 3 courses, and they really differ quite a lot in the way that students regard them. In terms of the question, we do follow-up questionnaires and we have not published the ratings data. That's a sensitive question with our universities. We don't want to do it until we've got basically buy-in that we should do it ourselves. In the meantime, there are sites that are starting to do this, as third-party sites that are starting to do the ratings. And we think ratings are good. We're not going to push them down the throats of our partners till our partners are ready for it. And I think ultimately it would be good to have it on our site, but like I say, it's not a high priority at the moment to do that.
Let's go here, and then we'll go back over there.
Activity of both the higher education institutions and the Ivy Leagues and the professors to actually participate, because who are the teachers? Because if you're taking a class from a Harvard or a Yale or a Stanford versus some of the other organizations, you would get a higher level of education. And how are you testing so that they can be certified that somebody actually took the class, passed the class, and has a certain level of knowledge?
Well, we are being very selective in which university partners we choose. So basically, we've got about a little under 60 US partners, all of which are recognizable names, top quality schools. And then around the world, we're trying to limit ourselves more or less to the top 5 or so in the country, a little bit more in a few places like Britain, and maybe a few more in China, just given the scale. So we're starting with we're letting the universities do our quality control for us, because we're only picking top tier universities. And it isn't, as much as we'd like to think it's true that the best courses are always going to be from Yale and Stanford and Harvard, that's just not true. I mean, there are great teachers at the University of Michigan. We have an amazing calculus course from Ohio State that's just a fabulous course. It probably should, and I wish it would replace all the calculus teaching at Yale, frankly, which is not that great. So there's a lot of, good stuff will find its way. And there will, obviously, once we have rating systems and better information, I think people, consumers will make informed choices of which are the best courses.
Mostly you've been talking about research universities. Are you also partnering with the liberal arts colleges, or not so much?
We would be happy to, and so far only 2 have signed on, Wesleyan and Smith. And part of the reason is, 1, these schools are resource constrained. 2, they don't do lecture courses that much. Yeah. I mean, they're doing small class seminars most of the time, and so it's not. It's a stretch for a lot of the faculty. Now, we've been talking with a consortium of liberal arts colleges about, trying to get all of them to put just a toe in the water, kind of a token experiment. It's funny. A lot of the liberal arts colleges are kind of paranoid that this is going to ruin their business model,
niche or whatever.
which I think is not, I mean, even more than the research universities, they provide an amazing nurturing experience for students and something very special that I think, you know, Williams and Amherst and Swarthmore aren't going to disappear because of MOOCs in our lifetimes.
Over here.
Yes, thank you for the clarity and quality of your remarks. I noticed that several times you mentioned the disproportionate market share that Coursera has relative to the other platforms, and I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit, either as an academic leader or as an economist, about how we should be thinking about the evolution of the platform space going forward, which, as you know, is very dynamic, and there's a great deal of conversation and controversy about how the platform landscape might best unfold at this moment in history.
Well, you know, antitrust was one of my specialties. I don't think this is a winner-take-all market, like certain platform markets. That is, I think there'll be vigorous competition. I don't see. You know, I think the fact that the top U.S. universities are kind of divided between two platforms, actually it's healthy. I mean, it's healthy for competition. We spur each other. And it would actually, you know, so from an economics point of view, I think the ecosystem is developing pretty well. Also, there are these niches. And we're in the credentialing business for business and tech learners, but we're not focused on it. And our university partners don't want to be thought of as trade schools. They want to have the full range of their intellectual content available. So there will be very successful niche firms. Like, I mean, Udacity is one possibility, and there's a lynda.com. There's some other firms in that space which are just working on the tech credentials. And I think, you know, you have this Novo Ed, a recent entrant, focusing on kind of group projects as a theme. Some of the platforms that are now that have in the past served on-campus use or small private courses like Canvas are starting to venture into the MOOC space. So I think I mean, as an industrial organization economist, I think the competition is pretty healthy. I mean, you know, I think there'll be plenty of constraints on the market power of Coursera. I'm not really worried about being sued on antitrust grounds anytime soon.
As long as they're free, I don't see you're exercising too much monopoly power.
Exactly.
Kenneth.
Ask about the effects on, well, we've seen the reproduction, the basis of this is ease of reproduction.
Mm-hmm.
That leads to superstars, as Sherwin Rosen pointed out a long time ago.
Mm-hmm, sure.
Now, won't this create enormous inequalities in income to different members of the faculty? There are a number of implications. Let me just bring out that one. Just as we see in sports, in fact, even in intercollegiate sports, right now it takes the form of competition for coaches, but we're maybe moving toward of this way, so it's going to be a competition for monetary compensation for players.
Sure.
And won't this create problems for the social structure, the interactive relationship within the faculties?
Well, I remember in 1980 when the Bayh-Dole Act passed, and universities were then given the rights to patent the fruits of public-funded research. And all of the same set of fears emerged. How are we going to cope with the fact that and most schools in those early years adopted policies where the royalties were shared between the university, between the sponsoring department, and between the faculty and the faculty member himself or herself. And there were all these fears then about that being really distracting the university, creating a two-tier system, you know, being unhealthy. And I think we've managed to cope pretty well with that. And there are some big winners, and there are some there's some faculty members who've gotten very rich on royalties, and many who haven't. And just like faculty members have gotten very rich on textbooks.
Just like economics faculty are doing much better than many other courses.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's true, Ken. I mean, you see it from the side John and I have. Not only do they make much more outside income, they make much more inside income too. So So yes, there will be, it will create another source of disparity, but textbooks already do, patents already do, and the market for external, consulting services and things like that already do. So I don't think this will add a complication that isn't already present.
I think there's one last question, and then we're going to live with our standard 6 p.m. close.
What is the evidence on the quality of learning by students who complete the platform compared to, say, students who complete a course in a regular university? And I would think the answer differed by the tier of the university, but what's the evidence?
Okay, so actually, this is a great question. What's the quality of learning for those who take MOOCs relative to those who do the same work inside a university? First, let me just qualify this. The research ecosystem is just getting going, but this is one of the great benefits of this large-scale data, that we'll be able to do really great research on all kinds of questions like that one. So I know of one paper that's been done on this subject, done by some MIT professors working on the edX platform in an introductory physics course. Now, you could say, I will give you my skeptical, I see John squinting. Yeah, so the reason it's sketchy, the work, the statistics are sound. The reason it's sketchy is that the course was kind of a remedial physics course. So the course was for MIT admits who needed to take kind of a remedial course to get up to speed to take the basic physics course. So we're dealing with a somewhat selected MIT population. But that population did not perform as well as the online learners who took the same course. The differences weren't large, but there was a slightly significantly better performance on the online learners to the MIT learners. Now, another thing we learned in this was you would have thought those with more educational preparation might have done better in this course than those without, but that's not true. They were unable to reject the hypothesis that all the online learners were essentially equal. So that's an encouraging result. It's a start. There's going to be a lot more research, and we'll learn a lot more in the future.
So just to elaborate my opening remark, Madison Bumgardner won the MVP of the Division Series. And your presence here indicates you think Rick Levin's better than Madison Bumgardner. So he's better than an MVP.
Thank you.